Welcome to the Constrained View. The topic today, I just came up with the title for it because it seemed to represent what's been going on at CBS. Is CBS the New Pravda? We don't know, do we? They sure are acting like it. Let's review. On February 16th, 2025 episode of Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan, by the way, there will be some things that in the show notes I'll have the links for. So be sure and look in the show notes if you want to watch the actual episode or read the actual transcript or whatever of some things that I'm going to mention. Okay, here we go. February 16th, 2025 episode of Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan. While interviewing Secretary of State Marco Rubio, she blamed, pay attention, she blamed the Holocaust on freedom of speech. Now, she's 44 years old. And to some, that might be young. You know, okay, she's 44. She doesn't know her history. Maybe she doesn't. But she is in the job of doing research. She's a reporter. She's a journalist. At least I'm sure that's what she calls herself. She's not just a show host. So we cannot let her get away with this incorrect information. We can't do it. Let's see how it rolled out. Brennan began by chiding Vice President J.D. Vance for his speech in Munich, Germany at the security conference. You know what? I'm going to read the entire exchange between them and make comments in various places because it's quite telling. All of this is included in the transcript link that I'll be sending you. That's in the show notes, I mean. It's quite telling where CBS is, and thus the question, is CBS the new Pravda? I don't know, but they sure do act like it. Let's read it. Brennan says to Rubio, she says, I want to ask you about what happened in Munich, Germany at the security conference. Vice President Vance gave a speech, and he told U.S. allies that the threat he worries about the most is not Russia, is not China. He called it the threat from within, and he lectured about what he described as censorship, mainly focusing, though, on including this. You've got to remember this quote. Focusing, though, on including more views from the right. She didn't stop there. He also met, she's speaking of J.D. Vance, he also met with the leader of a far-right party known as the AFD. Now, the AFD, I didn't really know who they were, so I looked them up. They are the Alternative for Deutschland, or Alternative for Germany. It's a political party that's been going on for a while. Kind of like, I don't want to say it's equivalent to the MAGA movement in the United States because I don't know enough about it, but Brennan is making that assumption and pushing that. So anyway, she says the far-right party known as the AFD, which, as you know, is under investigation and monitoring by German intelligence because of extremism. What did all this accomplish other than irritating our allies? Oh, we just all want to get along, except when you don't. Doesn't this sound a bit familiar? Think about the school board meetings. Parents asking the school board, what are you doing with the money? Why are children's scores so low? Why are you allowing pornography into our children's libraries at the school? Ooh boy. The CIA, the FBI, various other things, I'm sure. We're all sicked on them. They were extremists. They were domestic terrorists. Same thing that the German police are doing now. But still, to Margaret, listening to her, all this took me back to the 1930s and watching now I wasn't there, but I've watched the news clips, I've watched the interviews of Hitler, of his top people. I've seen the trials uh, of the various people who were doing these bad things during World War II in Germany. Um, but Margaret, she would have fit in quite well with Germany's Uniparty, headed by old Adolf. And she would have fit in with the USSR later because I bet she'd have been angling for a top job at Pravda. And she'd been cozying up to old Joseph V. Stalin. So anyway, Rubio's going to answer her question of what did all this accomplish other than irritating our allies? Rubio asked her a question back. He said, why would our allies or anybody be irritated by free speech and by someone giving their opinion? We are, after all, democracies. The Munich Security Conference is largely a conference of democracies, in which one of the things that we cherish and value is the ability to speak freely and provide your opinions. And so I think if anyone's angry about his words, he meant J.D. Vance's, they don't have to agree with him. But to be angry about it, I think actually makes his point. I thought it was actually a pretty historic speech, whether you agree with him or not. I think the valid points he's making to Europe is we are concerned that the true values we share, the values that bind us together with Europe, are things like free speech and democracy and shared history in winning 2 world wars and defeating Soviet communism and the like. These are the values that we shared in common. And in that Cold War, we fought against things like censorship and oppression and so forth. And when you see backsliding and you raise that, that's a very valid concern. We can't tell them how to run their countries. He, meaning J.D. Vance, simply expressed in a speech his view of it, which a lot of people frankly share. And I thought he said a lot of things in that speech that needed to be said. And honestly, I don't know why anyone would be upset about it. People are, you don't have to agree on someone's speech. I happen to agree with a lot of what he said, but you don't have to agree with someone's speech to at least appreciate the fact that they have a right to say it and that you should listen to it and see whether those criticisms are valid. I assure you, the United States has come under withering criticism on many occasions from many leaders in Europe, and we don't go around throwing temper tantrums about it. And if you think about it, this is now Angela speaking. He got to the end of his answer there. If you think about it, the entire world as countries are pointing fingers at the United States and pretty much saying things like, well, you're the new kid on the block and you don't have the gravitas that we do and you're a bit rough around the edges or whatever. And yet they all want our money, don't they? Every one of them. They want our money. They want our technology. They even go out of the way to steal it. Look at China. China, ooh, we're so big and bad and ooh, ooh, ooh. as they style and profile on the world stage. But whose technology do they steal? Ours. They don't come up with any new technology on their own that works. If they do, it's an accident. Anything that does work is based on stuff we've already done, and by we, I mean the scientists and the technologists and the technology people in the U.S. that are absolute geniuses about these things. They solve a problem. So to put his comment a little bit about going around throwing temper tantrums, and that's not what the U.S. does. My translation as a good Southern woman would be, we don't get our panties in a wad. Anyway, Brennan, not liking that answer. She said, well, he, meaning J.D. Vance, was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. Oh, Ms. Margaret, Ms. Margaret, Ms. Margaret, you don't know what a big fool you've made of yourself, and I have to wonder if anybody at CBS, maybe you can let me know, if anybody at CBS who's been around longer than you maybe remembers some of all this Cold War stuff. You were born at the tail end of it. You're such a child. Is anybody at CBS management aware that she totally just lied about history? But she said, well, Vance was standing in a country where free speech was weaponized to conduct a genocide. And he met with the head of a political party that has far-right views and some historic ties to extreme groups. Bet she doesn't even know what that means. The context of that was changing the tone of what he was saying. And you know that, she says to Rubio, that the censorship was specifically about the right. And Rubio says, well, I have to disagree with you. She jumps in. He says, no. She jumps in again. He says, she jumps in again. He says, I have to disagree with you. Free speech was not used to conduct a genocide. The genocide was conducted by an authoritarian Nazi regime that happened to also be genocidal because they hated Jews and they hated minorities and they hated those that they had a list of people they hated, but primarily the Jews. There was no free speech in Nazi Germany. There was none. There was also no opposition to Nazi Germany. They were a sole and only party that governed that country. So that's not a reflection, an accurate reflection of history. I also think it's wrong. Again, I go back to the point of his speech. The point of his speech was basically that there is an erosion of free speech and intolerance of opposing points of view within Europe. And that's the concern because that is eroding. That's not an erosion of your military capabilities. That's not an erosion of your economic standing. That's an erosion of the actual values that bind us together in this transatlantic union that everybody talks about. And I think allies and friends and partners that have worked together now for 80 years should be able to speak frankly to one another in open forums without being offended, insulted, or upset. I spoke to foreign ministers from multiple countries throughout Europe. Many of them probably didn't like the speech or didn't agree with it, but they were continuing to engage with us on all sorts of issues that unite us. So again, at the end of the day, I think that, people give all. That is a forum in which you're supposed to be inviting people to give speeches, not basically a chorus where everyone is saying the exact same thing. In the South, we'd say where everybody's singing from the same hymn book. But, as the Democrats in their dance and singing things that they're doing to protest Doge are proving that the Democrats don't know how to sing. They definitely don't know how to dance. That's not always going to be the case when it's a collection of democracies where leaders have the right and the privilege to speak their minds in forums such as these. Secretary Marco Rubio laid it down for her. There was no comeback. And here's what she said. Mr. Secretary, I'm told that we are out of time. A lot to get through with you. We appreciate you making time today. And then to the camera, we'll be back in a minute. I'm told we're out of time. We're out of time because you started making some good points, Secretary Rubio. You started telling her what's what. Did anybody at the CBS HQ hear any of this? What are y'all doing? But Miss Margaret was right. We are out of time. And we're starting to not be pussyfooting around about it. Look, there's a time to be polite, and there's a time to kick butt. And you can kick butt politely, but you still know you got kicked in the butt. Got to say the truth. I've heard some people or read in some articles that some say that Miss Brennan fails to understand that without free speech she would not have a job. That is an incorrect understanding of what free speech is about. You see, Marxist leadership would totally give her a job on some commie rag that they're coming up with, which, by the way, CBS is acting like a commie rag, televised version of it. Governor Tim Walz would be right next to her at the anchor desk. They'd make a fine team, wouldn't they? Smiling, saying there's no guaranteed free speech. Oh no, no, no. You can't spread misinformation. That's hate speech. And she'd be going, that's right. Back to you. Back to you. We'll see in a few. Time for a commercial. Who's paying their bills? I tell you, it's not fun. Did CBS leadership learn anything from the Face the Nation interview with Rubio? No. Did they even give a thought to what that means for their programming? No. And how do we know that? Because hard on the heels of Brennan's attack of free speech on Face the Nation, 60 Minutes had the gall to broadcast the segment that's linked below that followed German thought police to raid the homes of some in Germany who posted their opinion on social media. The link is below. That host, Sharon Alfonsi, is 52. Now, that's still, 44, she's 8 years older than Brennan. But obviously she grew up in a bubble. If she still is unaware, if she thinks that this thing that Germany's doing is good, then she needs another thing coming. But we know she agreed with it because there was a twinkle of approval in everything the Germans were doing and what her guests were saying. She, excuse me, she was having a hard time keeping a smile off her face, but that twinkle never wavered. She liked what they were doing and what they were saying. So Alfonsi and Brennan are representatives of the types of reporters the Soviet Socialist Republic, the USSR, their leading propaganda organ, Pravda, would have working for them. So they'd have a job if Marxism had its way. But there was that Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's a not a German name. It's a Russian name, and I've always had a hard time saying it. He saw all of this. His parents were highly religious. He grew up in a religious home. He was Christian, and then he was pulled into the, what do you call that, the army there in Russia and forced to serve, and he did because he was a good citizen, right? But during that time, he lost his faith in God. He lost it. And some time passed, and he got his faith back. I don't know what happened. I'd have to read a lot of his stuff, but he did get it back. That was not copacetic with the government. And of course, he was punished for it multiple ways. And finally, they just couldn't take it anymore. His manuscripts were somehow gotten out of Russia and were published in the United States and other countries, and he became a name because he was speaking truth to power, and yet they were still putting him down. Well, then finally he moved, and then he ended up moving to, I think it was Maine, where he lived for a bit, and then finally the after all the wall came down, and after all kinds of this, that, and the other, and the Soviet Union broke apart, he was allowed to come back home. And he missed his country. He grew up there. He loved the people. There's nothing wrong with that. And then he died in 2008. So I mean, this man lived a long time, and he went through a lot to speak truth to power. And who was he? He was just a person. He didn't have a high rank. He wasn't one of the inner circle. He was just a person. And all of us have that ability to speak truth to power. It's not easy. Doesn't always have an immediate effect, as Solzhenitsyn let us know with his writings of many years of him writing stories about this sort of thing. But I still have to ask the question. Let me get that where I've got it just right way. Is CBS the New Pravda? CBS? Everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know. And where are you getting your financing from, CBS? I hope when we dig deep, and by we I mean Doge, I hope when Doge runs all the databases and all the things through their algorithms, and they are able to pull out all the stuff that's in it, is your station, is your network, are these shows going to show up? Are your employers going to show up as having been recipients of some laundered money that belong to the citizens of the U.S., tax-paying citizens? It's a good question. And I wonder if they have an answer. So we'll see. If you have any thoughts on this, please feel free to leave a message or comment. Okay, we'll talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.